Okay, we're gonna call this a mini vlog update. Anyway, it's Facebook Live, just because I'm in the mood to just jump on. I wanted to fill you guys in on where we are. When last I left you, I had completed a bunch of tops for my desk. But, all right. Let's run through this just so I can organize my thoughts. I'm gonna be doing a longer video about this for the website called Production Dojo, which is coming up in the future. That'll be a January thing that I'm doing with Liam, but just because we've been talking about it. Sorry about the exposure. There's nothing I can do about it for Facebook Live. The software is the software. So let's recap. I rebuilt my home office. I'm gonna sneeze. I rebuilt my home office, and while I was doing that, I redid the desk. Now, I did it all in extruded aluminum that they use for making engineering products. It's by a company called 8020. We've talked about it before, and it's something called T-slot aluminum, which means there are grooves in it that are like, they're kind of shaped like this, where the slot is kind of thin, and then there's a big opening underneath. If you imagine where my fingers are, that's the slot that's exposed on the outside of the desk, and then that sort of hole in here is underneath. It's inside the surface of the desk. And what you can do is you can put things in here that are too big to come up through the slot, right? And then if you bolt into them, it means you can attach stuff anywhere along the length of the desk. So I love this stuff. Like most engine nerds, as I'll call us, I always thought that it would make a fantastic material to make a significant piece of furniture out of. It is expensive. So everybody always kind of shies away from it at the last minute, and I just went for it. So I built this desk, but I built the desk with no concern for the tops, the wooden surfaces or the plastic surfaces that I would actually be writing on. I built the frame, and I figured, because had never done it before, never thought about it before, I just figured, well, how hard can it be to find a company who will just cut some wood the size of whatever shape I leave the desk opening? So I paid attention to all the other measurements, but not the openings where the wood would go. And this proved to be an interesting choice. So so it's a corner unit, right? So there's a corner, and then there's two rectangular work surfaces. Let's use the work surfaces as an example of the problem that I had to overcome. Those work surfaces are 50.5 inches long and 29 inches deep. Now, when you're working with wood, and you don't want to spend $1 trillion, they're also 1.5 inches thick. Some numbers to remember are 48 and 96. That is the size of a standard piece of plywood. It's 48 inches on the short direction and 96 inches on the long dimension. Now let's jump back to the conversation we had about my desktops. They are 50.5 inches, which means the thin dimension of a rectangular piece of plywood is too short to be a desktop. So that means you have to turn them sideways, so the piece of plywood's like yay big, and the desktop is going to take up a chunk of that. It's taking up 55 inches out of 96, which means there is 50.6, so 50 whatever, which means we're too short to get two desktops out of the length of a piece of plywood. And to make matters worse, the 29 inch dimension, if you double that, you get 60, which is significantly bigger than 48, which means there's no orientation where I can cut one of these worktops out of, get two of them out of one piece of plywood. So that's annoying. Oh, but it gets worse. Because it's 1.5 inches thick, the top, and the reasonable plywood that I can get my hands on is 3/4 of an inch deep, you need to put 2 layers of plywood for each desktop, unless you want to get super fancy, which I don't. So 2 layers of plywood, but I can only get one desktop out of a sheet of plywood with a lot of waste, which means we're looking at 2 sheets of plywood per desktop for the sides. So that's 4 pieces of plywood to start with. Not bad. You know, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, and certainly much cheaper than any hardwoods I can get. So just to give a piece of perspective, a piece of hardwood, like, you know, maple or something significant or really well-made butcher block that would cover it, we're easily talking $600 or $700 for each of those tops. And in my case, you know, we're looking at $75 or $100 worth of plywood for each top. Okay, fine. If I had been, and the 29-inch dimension is much deeper than 26, which is the average desktop, which means I also can't just run to IKEA and grab their pre-made desktops, even if I thought they would be strong enough, which I don't. And nor can I get pre-made IKEA tabletops that are deep enough. So we're out of the pre-made options that are reasonably priced, and we wind up building it ourselves. So my first plan when I decided to do this was, I decided that what I wanted a butcher block look on the top. So what you guys saw in the videos was I took a piece of plywood and then I put 2x4s across the top. I laid them down like on the 4-inch dimension. Now 2x4s are not 2 inches by 4 inches, they're 1.5 by 3.5. So you do the math and you go 3.5 inches into 29 inches. You know, we had basically the same problem, right? We wound up with X number of 2x4s across the surface. Now do the math. 3/4 of an inch for the plywood and then 1.5 inches for the height of the 2x4, and you get 2.25 inches thick, which is a full inch thicker than I need. So what I did was I used the computerized CNC, the ShopBot, to cut off the top inch. And what I wound up with was a piece of plywood with 1 inch of 2x4, and I glued all that together. I glued it together and then had the CNC cut it out and plane it down to height. And it looked good. It looked a lot better than I thought. You'll see pictures or have seen pictures. It looked a lot better than I was afraid it was going to look. However, the problem we came up with was, as apparently the planing exposed new wood in the 2x4, and I kid you not, on Friday night when I was finished, that board was to within 1/1000th of an inch perfectly flat and level, both sides. I guarantee you, perfect. And by Saturday afternoon, from the ends to the middle, there was a 1/2 an inch of bow. The wood had warped that much. Now I could wet the wood, steam the wood, put a bunch of weight on the wood. I might be able to bend it back into shape, but the configuration I had picked was just fundamentally unstable in some way I don't necessarily completely understand. And so we wound up scrapping all of those tops and making new ones. And Ken, I hear you say, 3/4 of an inch sounds like a very familiar number. How about you just glue 3/4 inch plywood on top of each other and forego the butcher block look, and you're good to go. And that is, in the end, what I just finished spending 2 days doing. So what you see on the desk in the photos that you've seen is just really high-grade plywood. I say high-grade, it's as high-grade as you can get from Home Depot. Plywood, birch plywood, they call it, which is still a softwood, but not bad. And I just cut out the pieces and accepted the fact that there's a fair amount of waste. And if we talk about the corner unit is essentially a bunch of complicated shapes that live within a 51-inch rectangle. So the corner unit's a square, but then like we cut the back corners off because it's a square, but it's 45 degrees to fit into the corner of a room, right? So you obviously have to cut the corners off and whatever. If you do the math for that, you get a 51-inch square. The longest dimension in a square is from corner to corner, right? So I needed one piece of wood in theory that would cover from corner to corner. And what I wound up with was that number is 72 inches about, by the way. So a 96-inch piece of plywood worked fine for that. So I took the piece of plywood and I kind of put it 45 degrees and it filled in the front of that corner unit. But you'll notice I said the square was 51 inches, which means the long dimension is 72. So a piece of plywood covered one corner to corner fine, but it wasn't deep enough to go all the way back to the back of the desk. We got pretty fortunate. The desk doesn't go all the way to the wall in the back. I had cut the corner off, and then there's a gap in front of the back rail that I had left for like cables and monitor, cords and just general space. And it's okay that there's a little bit of a gap back there. So the corner unit does not go all the way into the corner of the room. It's out from there, but that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. So basically took the plywood, used some 3M spray contact adhesive, glued two pieces of it together to laminate it, threw it on the shop bot, cut it out, brought it home, dropped it in. Perfect. Because it's still wood and inexpensive wood at that, there are, some slight, it's not like laser flat, right? There's a little bit of variation in it, but that I had already accounted for. That was going to be true no matter what I did with wood of any description in this case. So what I have is, I have these threaded inserts. So basically you screw those into the wood, and the inside of those, they're like big screws that are hollow in the middle. The inside of those accepts a bolt, and I have brackets for the desk. So when the wood is there, there's a bracket underneath, and I'll have these inserts into the wood, and when I draw the bolts down, it will draw the wood perfectly flat and level with the aluminum. Again, we're only making adjustments, a 32nd of an inch here, and sucking it down so that there's no wobble and no play, and it's supported everywhere it needs to be supported, and that is going to work perfectly. That's the job for today. And then as a finish, I have chosen a wipe-on clear satin finish polyurethane by Minwax. It's got fantastic reviews. I picked a wipe-on because I don't want to deal with drips and drabs and having a lot of polyurethane running around. So basically with this stuff, you just take a cloth, wipe it on super thin. You don't put a big layer on it. You leave it for 2 hours. You come back, you clean it off real quick. You wipe another layer on, come back, clean it off, wipe another layer on. So like 6 to 8 hours or so, and you're pretty much good to go. And then you just like leave the last layer for a little while, and you're good. I'm considering leaving the tops unfinished. So I'm thinking about that. Polyurethane is nice, and I like it, but there's something about the possibility of sort of just leaving it be that I like. I like the natural wood. I like the feel of it. The only place it's a problem to have the real wood, because I can't hyper sand it because it's just plywood. I mean, the veneer at the top is really thin. Is just right where my mouse moves. There's a little, it doesn't glide on the wood, but I'm considering